They don't talk over you because they're louder. They talk over you because at some point you were trained to step back.
Most people believe they are talked over because others are rude, dominant, or careless. That belief is comforting because it places the problem outside the self. But comfort is rarely useful. When I was younger, I noticed something unsettling. The same people who interrupted me did not interrupt everyone. With others they listened, with others they waited. That observation stayed with me longer than any insult ever did. To be spoken over is not merely a social inconvenience. It is a quiet erosion of presence. Each interruption, when accepted without resistance, teaches others how to treat you and teaches you how little you expect from yourself. Yet the Stoic does not rush to blame the crowd. He pauses and asks a harder question. What am I signaling through my posture, my timing, my words that invites this behavior? This is not a lecture about clever tricks or verbal dominance. It is about authority that does not raise its voice. The kind of authority that settles into a room before a sentence is finished. That authority begins long before speech. It begins in how seriously you take your own thoughts. There was a period in my life when I spoke quickly as though time itself might interrupt me if I did not hurry. I filled gaps with unnecessary explanations. I softened statements before they were challenged, and when someone cut in, I yielded, pretending it did not matter. I told myself I was being polite. In truth, I was being evasive. I was avoiding the discomfort of holding my ground. The Stoics understood something most people miss. The world responds less to what you say and more to what you tolerate. You cannot control whether someone interrupts you, but you are fully responsible for what happens after that moment. Do you retreat inward, letting your thought dissolve, or do you remain steady, as if nothing essential has been taken from you? Silence when chosen is strength. Silence when forced is surrender. The difference is internal, but it shows externally with unmistakable clarity. Before any phrase can stop interruption, something else must already be present, an unhurried mind. When your thoughts are settled, your words arrive with weight. They do not rush. They do not plead. People interrupt frantic speech because it feels unfinished even when it is not. Calm speech, by contrast, feels complete even before the final word. In one of the old forums of Rome, speakers were trained not merely to speak well, but to pause well. A pause is not empty. It is a declaration that you expect space. Most people fear silence because they think it weakens their position. In reality, silence exposes impatience in others. Those who rush to fill it reveal themselves. Being talked over is often the result of speaking from a place of reaction rather than intention. Reaction is noisy. Intention is quiet, and quiet things command attention when they are rooted in conviction. There is also a moral dimension to this that rarely gets addressed. When you allow yourself to be consistently interrupted, you are not only being unkind to yourself, you are training others into poor character. You are rewarding impatience. The Stoic does not enable disorder, even in small social exchanges. He corrects gently, firmly, without anger. Correction does not require confrontation. It requires consistency. People who are rarely talked over do not look for the right moment to assert themselves. They assume the moment is theirs. This assumption is not arrogance. It is responsibility. You showed up to speak. You owe it to your own reason to finish the thought you began. There is a quiet discipline in refusing to compete for airtime. When someone cuts in, the untrained person either withdraws or escalates. The disciplined person remains present. He does not rush to reclaim the floor, nor does he abandon it. He waits, then resumes, as if interruption were a minor inconvenience, not a verdict. That resumption is not accidental. It is guided by language shaped through reflection. Certain phrases, when spoken calmly, restore balance without hostility. They do not accuse. They do not embarrass. They simply reassert reality, that a thought was in progress and it will now continue. But these phrases only work when they align with your inner posture. If spoken with resentment, they sound defensive. If spoken with insecurity, they invite challenge. When spoken with composure, they settle the moment like dust falling after movement. Before we speak of the words themselves, we must understand the deeper task. You are not trying to silence others. You are training yourself to remain unmoved by disruption. The words are tools, not weapons. They are extensions of character. In the parts that follow, I will share 6 such phrases, not as scripts to memorize, but as expressions of a certain inner stance. Each one reflects a choice to remain steady rather than reactive, clear rather than forceful, grounded rather than eager for approval. Used correctly, they do not make you louder, they make you harder to ignore. And that, ultimately, is not about being heard by others. It is about hearing yourself clearly enough to finish what you began. The first thing to understand before any phrase is spoken is this: interruption is rarely about disagreement. Most interruptions come from impatience, excitement, or an untrained urge to assert presence. When you respond as though you are under attack, you misread the situation and weaken your position. The Stoic response begins with accurate judgment. You are not being threatened. You are being tested, often unconsciously, for steadiness. There was a time when I believed that asserting myself meant pressing forward with force. I raised my voice slightly. I spoke faster. I tightened my tone, and in doing so I gave others exactly what they expected: resistance. Resistance invites escalation. Escalation turns conversation into contest. The Stoic avoids contests that do not serve character. The first phrase I learned to use did not sound impressive. It was not clever. It was simple, almost plain. When someone interrupted, I waited until they finished, then calmly said, "Let me finish this thought." Nothing more. No edge, no apology, no explanation. What surprised me was not that the phrase worked, but why it worked. It worked because it assumed legitimacy. It did not ask for permission. It did not accuse the other person of wrongdoing. It stated a fact: a thought was in progress, and it would now continue. Many people try to soften such a sentence with qualifiers. They add "sorry" or "if that's okay" or just "quickly." Each addition weakens the statement. It shifts responsibility away from reason and toward approval. The Stoic does not outsource his right to speak. This phrase requires a specific inner discipline, patience. You must allow the interruption to fully land and pass before you reclaim the floor. Speaking over an interruption is still reacting to it. Waiting, then resuming, demonstrates control over tempo. Tempo is power. There is a subtle detail here that matters more than the words themselves. Your posture remains unchanged. Your breathing remains slow. Your gaze does not harden. You are not correcting a child. You are restoring order. Order does not need emotion to support it. At first, using this phrase feels uncomfortable. You may feel exposed, as though you are claiming more space than you deserve. That discomfort is not a signal to retreat. It is a signal that you are stepping out of habit. Habit teaches us to yield prematurely. Discipline teaches us to complete what we start. The Stoics trained themselves to finish internal judgments before reacting externally. This is the same practice applied outward. You do not rush to accommodate impatience. You allow your reason to run its course. There is another phrase closely related to the first, used when interruptions are repeated or habitual. It is spoken in the same calm tone: "I wasn't done yet." Again, no accusation, no sharpness, just clarity. The phrase works because it leaves no opening for debate. One cannot reasonably argue with the fact that someone was not finished. People who interrupt frequently rely on social friction to avoid correction. They assume others will choose comfort over clarity. When you speak this sentence evenly without tension, you remove friction. The moment becomes clean. Most people adjust immediately, not because they were defeated, but because they were reminded. What matters is consistency. Use the phrase once, and it may feel awkward. Use it calmly every time, and it becomes part of your presence. Others begin to anticipate it. Eventually, they stop interrupting before the phrase is needed. This is how Stoic influence works. It does not dominate. It shapes, quietly, steadily, through repeated alignment between word and character. There is a temptation to treat these phrases as techniques, to deploy them selectively when you feel wronged. That approach fails. The phrases must reflect who you are becoming, not moods you are in. If you use them only when irritated, they will carry irritation. If you use them as a matter of principle, they will carry weight. You may wonder whether this makes you seem rigid or unfriendly. In practice, it has the opposite effect. People relax around clarity. They grow tense around uncertainty. When your boundaries are calm and predictable, others no longer test them. The deeper lesson in this first phrase is not about speech. It is about self-trust. You trust that your thought is worth finishing. You trust that time will not punish you for taking a few seconds more. You trust that reason deserves completion. The Stoics believed that dignity is not granted by others. It is maintained by the self. Each time you finish a thought without rushing, without apologizing for existing, you reinforce that dignity. And dignity, once established, speaks before you do. In the next movement of this lecture, we will turn to a different situation, the interruption that comes not from impatience, but from dominance. This requires a different response, equally calm, but firmer in its boundary. Not all interruptions are equal. Some come from enthusiasm or habit. Others come from a quiet attempt to assert control. These are the interruptions that arrive early, before your idea has fully formed, as if to redirect the conversation onto safer ground for the other person. They are not loud, but they are persistent, and if you yield to them, you slowly disappear from the exchange. The Stoic response to dominance is not submission, nor is it confrontation. It is firmness without friction. I once worked alongside a man who interrupted with precision. He never raised his voice. He never spoke over people loudly. Instead, he entered conversations at the exact moment they became uncomfortable for him. He reframed, redirected, or concluded them prematurely. Many mistook his behavior for confidence. In truth, it was avoidance dressed as authority. For a long time I allowed it. Each time I did, I felt a small internal fracture, not anger, something quieter and more corrosive, self-doubt. The Stoics warned against this kind of erosion, not because it hurts pride, but because it weakens judgment. When you doubt your right to finish a thought, you begin to doubt the thought itself. The phrase that changed this pattern was deliberate and measured. I want to complete this before we move on. Notice the structure. It does not ask. It does not resist. It states intention and sets sequence. First this, then that. Sequence matters more than force. When spoken calmly, this phrase establishes that you are aware of the redirection and are choosing not to follow it. You are not accusing the other person of dominance. You are simply refusing to be led away from your reasoning midstream. This requires internal alignment. If you secretly believe that the other person's input is more important than your own, the phrase will sound hollow. Stoicism teaches us to weigh ideas by reason, not by rank or volume. The moment you speak from that understanding, your voice steadies. There is a temptation, when faced with dominance, to harden the tone. Many believe firmness requires edge. In reality, edge signals insecurity. Calm firmness signals authority. Authority does not push. It remains. Another phrase serves well when the interruption comes cloaked in politeness, when someone cuts in with a smile and a gentle just to add that actually replaces your point. In such moments, the Stoic response is simple. Let me finish, then I'd like to hear your view. This sentence does two things at once. It protects your space and acknowledges theirs. It removes the excuse for impatience. What matters is that you follow through. You finish your thought fully. You do not rush to get out of the way. Then, and only then, you invite the other person in. This demonstrates fairness without surrender. The Stoics believed that justice begins in small interactions. Allowing others their turn is virtuous. So is taking your own. There will be moments when the dominant interrupter pushes again, ignoring your boundary. This is where many people falter. They either retreat to avoid tension or escalate to reassert control. The Stoic does neither. He repeats the boundary unchanged, unemotional. I'm still finishing this. Repetition without escalation is disarming. It denies the other person the drama they expect. Most people are unused to this steadiness. They rely on emotional shifts to gain leverage. When none appear, their strategy collapses. It is important to understand that you are not trying to win the conversation. Winning is external. You are practicing self-governance. That is internal. Whether the other person approves is irrelevant. What matters is that you acted in accordance with reason. At first, this practice will feel unnatural. You may notice your heart rate rise slightly. Your impulse will be to soften, to laugh, to yield. This is habit asserting itself. Let it pass. The Stoics trained themselves to sit with discomfort without obeying it. This is one such training. Over time, something subtle happens. Your mind begins to expect completion. You no longer brace for interruption. This expectation changes how you speak. Your sentences lengthen, your pauses deepen. Others sense this and adjust. People do not interrupt those who sound as though they are going somewhere. They interrupt those who seem unsure of the destination. This part of the discipline is not about asserting ego. It is about honoring the process of thought. Thought unfolds in sequence. To interrupt it prematurely is to disrespect reason itself. When you calmly insist on completion, you are not defending yourself. You are defending clarity. In the next part, we will examine the interruption that comes disguised as help. The person who finishes your sentences, reframes your point, or speaks on your behalf. This form of interruption is the most socially accepted and the most quietly damaging. There is a kind of interruption that almost never draws objection because it arrives wearing kindness. Someone finishes your sentence. Someone clarifies what you meant. Someone steps in to explain your point more efficiently than you can. On the surface it looks helpful. Beneath it, something essential is taken from you, authorship. The Stoics paid close attention to this subtle erosion, not because it offends pride, but because it dissolves responsibility. When others speak for you, you slowly stop speaking from yourself. You begin to rely on external voices to complete your reasoning. This weakens the inner muscle that Stoicism exists to strengthen. I once allowed this kind of interruption without resistance. I told myself it was cooperative, even generous. But over time I noticed a pattern. The same people who helped me finish my thoughts rarely allowed me to finish theirs. They did not intend harm, but intention does not cancel effect. The phrase that reclaims authorship in these moments must be precise and uncharged. That's close, but let me say it in my own words. Nothing confrontational, nothing apologetic, just a quiet correction of sequence. What makes this phrase effective is not its content, but its boundary. It draws a clear line between understanding and expression. You acknowledge the other person's engagement while reclaiming the right to define your own meaning. This matters more than most realize. When someone else completes your sentence, they are not merely saving time. They are shaping the narrative of your thinking. If you allow this repeatedly, you begin to edit yourself mid-thought, anticipating how others might finish it for you. The result is diluted speech and cautious reasoning. Stoicism demands ownership. You are responsible for your judgments. You must therefore be responsible for how they are expressed. Another phrase serves when someone reframes your point in a way that subtly alters its intent. That's not quite where I was going, let me clarify. This sentence does not accuse. It redirects. It signals that precision matters to you, that be almost right is not enough. Precision is a moral discipline in Stoicism. To tolerate misrepresentation, even minor, is to tolerate confusion. Confusion weakens judgment. The Stoic does not allow confusion to settle where clarity is possible. There is often discomfort in correcting someone who believes they are helping you. Many people fear appearing ungrateful, but gratitude does not require surrender. You can appreciate engagement without relinquishing control of your voice. The key is tone. These phrases must be delivered evenly, without embarrassment or irritation. If you sound defensive, the correction feels personal. If you sound calm, it feels procedural. You are not correcting the person, you are correcting the process. This distinction is crucial. Stoicism teaches us to separate individuals from actions. We do not attack character, we adjust behavior. When you do this consistently, others learn how to engage with you more accurately. There will be those who resist this boundary, who insist on paraphrasing or summarizing you despite correction. This reveals something important. They are more invested in appearing insightful than in understanding you. In such cases, repetition is necessary. I'd like to finish explaining it myself. No elaboration, no justification. Repetition without irritation is a rare skill. It requires internal quiet. When you are not emotionally hooked, repetition becomes firm rather than forceful. You may notice that after asserting this boundary, conversations slow down. This is a good sign. Speed often hides insecurity. Slowness invites thought. The Stoics valued deliberation because it aligns speech with reason. There is also a deeper shift that occurs within you. As you reclaim authorship, your thoughts sharpen. You begin to think in complete forms because you expect to express them fully. This internal expectation strengthens your presence before a word is spoken. Being spoken over is not always about volume. Often, it is about substitution. Someone replaces your voice with theirs and calls it assistance. The disciplined response is neither gratitude nor resentment, but clarity. In the next part, we will examine the interruption that comes not from individuals, but from the group, the moment when multiple voices converge and your words are lost in collective momentum. This requires a different kind of steadiness, one rooted deeply in Stoic restraint. Group interruptions are the most revealing, not because they are aggressive, but because they expose how easily momentum replaces thought. In a group, voices stack quickly. One interruption invites another. The conversation accelerates, and anything measured is left behind. This is where many thoughtful people withdraw, not because they lack insight, but because they refuse to compete. The Stoic does not compete. He also does not disappear. I remember sitting in rooms where ideas were traded rapidly, almost as currency. Whoever spoke fastest seemed most valuable. When I tried to match that pace, I lost clarity. When I stayed silent, I lost presence. It took time to understand that neither approach was disciplined. The phrase that restores balance in a group is not dramatic. It must cut through movement without adding to it. Let's pause for a moment. Spoken calmly, this sentence interrupts the interruption. It resets tempo without assigning blame. This phrase works only when your tone carries sincerity. If spoken sharply, it sounds controlling. If spoken timidly, it dissolves. Calmness gives it legitimacy. You are not stopping the group. You are inviting it back to reason. There is a second phrase, equally important, used when your point is being drowned out rather than directly interrupted. I want to finish this before we add more. Again, sequence over dominance. You are not rejecting others' input. You are protecting coherence. Most group interruptions are not personal. They are structural. People follow energy. When energy rises, they speak. When energy slows, they listen. By slowing yourself deliberately, you influence the room without force. This requires internal restraint. Your instinct may be to raise your volume to be heard. Resist this. Loudness contributes to the problem. Stillness resolves it. The Stoics believed that self-command was visible. It showed in posture, breath, and timing. When you remain composed while others rush, you create contrast. Contrast draws attention more reliably than volume. There will be moments when the group ignores your attempt to pause. This is where many give up. The Stoic repeats, unchanged, one moment this point matters. The repetition is not stubbornness. It is responsibility. You are responsible for the clarity of what you bring into the world. Responsibility does not require permission. You may worry that this makes you seem difficult. In practice, it often earns quiet respect. Groups unconsciously seek structure. When no one provides it, chaos feels normal. When someone does, relief follows. Over time, you may notice something interesting. The group begins to wait for you, not consciously but instinctively. Your presence signals coherence. Others slow down around you without knowing why. This is not charisma, it is consistency. There is a temptation to speak less in groups to avoid interruption. This is a mistake. Stoicism does not teach withdrawal from participation. It teaches participation without attachment. You speak because reason demands expression, not because you need acknowledgement. When you release the need to be heard, paradoxically, you become easier to hear. Your words carry less urgency and more weight. Another phrase becomes useful when group conversation has moved on prematurely, leaving your point unfinished. Before we move on, I need to complete something. This sentence reaches backward without apology. It assumes continuity. It refuses to let thought be abandoned. Abandoning thought is easy in groups. Discipline is required to retrieve it. What matters here is not whether the group agrees with you. Agreement is external. Completion is internal. You are training yourself to finish what you start, even when momentum resists. This training extends beyond conversation. It strengthens your ability to complete tasks, sustain focus, and resist distraction. The Stoics understood that the same mind that yields conversational space too easily yields attention elsewhere. Each time you reclaim your place in group dialogue calmly, you reinforce a deeper habit, staying present amid noise. The most frequent interruption you will ever face does not come from another voice. It comes from your own restraint turning against you. You begin a thought, sense uncertainty in the room and stop. You soften the ending, you trail off. No one interrupted you, yet the result is the same. The thought remains unfinished. The Stoics were uncompromising about this kind of self-interruption, not because it appears weak, but because it reflects divided judgment. You are no longer guided by reason alone. You are negotiating with imagined reactions. I once noticed how often I did this. I would begin a sentence confidently, then introduce doubt halfway through. I think, maybe it's not fully formed yet. These phrases felt humble. In truth, they were evasive. They allowed me to withdraw before clarity was tested. The phrase that corrects, this is internal before it is spoken aloud. It is the decision to complete the sentence without modification. To allow the thought to stand as it is, even if imperfect. Stoicism does not demand flawless expression, it demands honest expression. When you feel the urge to stop yourself, pause not to retreat but to continue. Finish the thought calmly. Do not rush to justify it. Do not preemptively defend it. Let it exist. There is a sentence that helps when self-interruption arises from fear of disagreement. I'll finish the point, then we can examine it. This phrase reframes the moment. You are not insisting on being right. You are insisting on being complete. Completion is a form of respect. It respects your own reasoning process. It respects the listener's ability to engage thoughtfully rather than reactively. Many people interrupt themselves because they confuse openness with uncertainty. The Stoics drew a clear distinction. Openness is the willingness to revise after examination. Uncertainty is the refusal to commit long enough for examination to occur. When you habitually cut yourself short, others learn to do the same for you. They sense the gap and fill it, not out of malice, but because you have signaled that the thought is optional. This is why internal discipline matters more than external phrases. If you do not believe your thought deserves completion, no phrase will protect it. There is discomfort in allowing a thought to land without cushioning. You may feel exposed. Let that feeling pass. Exposure is not danger. It is clarity. The Stoics practiced negative visualization, imagining loss to reduce fear. Here, imagine the worst outcome of finishing your thought: disagreement. Disagreement does not harm character. Avoidance does. Another internal phrase proves useful when your mind begins to spiral mid-sentence. Stay with it. Simple, direct. It brings attention back to the present moment. It anchors you in the act of speaking rather than in imagined outcome. You may notice that when you stop self-interrupting, others interrupt you less. This is not coincidence. Self-assurance alters rhythm. When you speak as though you expect to finish, others follow that expectation. This does not make you rigid. You can still adjust, clarify, or revise after completion. The key is sequence. First completion, then refinement. Stoicism is not about stubbornness. It is about order. Reason unfolds in stages. To interrupt it prematurely is to disrespect its nature. As you train this habit, you may find that your speech slows. This is good. Slowness allows thought to deepen. It signals seriousness. People associate speed with performance. They associate steadiness with substance. There is a quiet confidence that emerges when you no longer negotiate your right to speak with yourself. This confidence is not loud. It does not seek dominance. It rests. There are moments when interruption is not about impatience, enthusiasm, or even dominance. It is about closure. Someone decides the conversation is finished while you are still speaking. They summarize, redirect, or dismiss with finality. This is the interruption that challenges restraint most sharply because it threatens not just your sentence, but your participation. The Stoic does not react to dismissal with resentment. He responds with resolve. I remember the first time I faced this deliberately. I was explaining a position that required nuance. Halfway through, the other person nodded, interrupted, and said, "I get it," then moved on. The room followed. I felt a surge of frustration, not because I needed agreement, but because my reasoning had been reduced to a conclusion I had not yet reached. The phrase that reclaimed the moment was simple. "That's not my conclusion yet." Spoken calmly, it reopened space without accusation. It did not challenge the other person's understanding. It clarified that understanding was incomplete. This phrase works because it asserts authorship over your own endpoint. No one else gets to decide when your thought is finished. There is variation used when dismissal comes in the form of summary. That skips an important part. Let me finish. Again, clarity over confrontation. You are not rejecting the summary. You are refusing to accept incompleteness. Dismissive interruptions often rely on social momentum. Once the conversation shifts, returning to it feels awkward. The Stoic accepts this discomfort. He values precision over ease. Ease is a poor guide for conduct. There will be times when asserting this boundary is met with resistance. The dismissive interrupter may appear irritated or impatient. This is where discipline is tested. You do not match their emotion. You maintain tone. You finish your thought at the same pace you would have if uninterrupted. Finishing calmly in the face of dismissal sends a powerful signal. Your reasoning is not dependent on approval. This does not mean you force others to listen indefinitely. Stoicism respects time and attention, but there is a difference between concision and erasure. You are responsible for ensuring your thought is not erased before it exists. Another phrase serves when dismissal is framed as efficiency. Before we wrap this up, one key point remains. This sentence respects closure while reclaiming substance. It acknowledges the desire to move on without surrendering clarity. Clarity is a duty. The Stoics believe that reason is our defining faculty. To allow it to be cut short repeatedly is to neglect that duty. You may notice an internal resistance when using these phrases. A voice will say it's not worth it. Sometimes that voice is correct. Not every conversation deserves completion. Stoicism is not stubborn insistence on speaking. It is discernment. The key question is this: are you choosing silence, or is silence being chosen for you? The Stoic chooses. When you choose silence, it is deliberate and peaceful. When silence is imposed, it leaves residue irritation, regret, self-doubt. Learn to recognize the difference. Over time, as you practice this discipline, you will notice fewer dismissive interruptions, not because others become kinder, but because your presence changes. People hesitate to close what feels unfinished and grounded. There is a quiet authority in refusing to be rushed to conclusion. It signals that thought, not convenience, governs you. This authority does not announce itself. It emerges through repetition. Each time you reclaim a dismissed thought without hostility, you strengthen it. In the next part, we will turn to integration. We will examine how these phrases and disciplines work together and how inconsistency weakens them. Stoic steadiness is not built on isolated acts, but on alignment across moments. Before we continue to Part 8, I want to pause with intention, not to break the flow, but to protect it. You are building something large, disciplined, and rare. This lecture is not content, it is structure. Rushing it, or fragmenting it, weakens exactly the Stoic qualities we're trying to embody. People fail to stop being talked over. It is rarely because they chose the wrong words. More often, it is because they used the right words inconsistently. One day they hold their ground, the next they yield to avoid tension. The message others receive is not confusion but permission. The Stoics understood that character is revealed through pattern, not moments. A single calm boundary does not establish presence. Repeated calm boundaries do. Integration is what turns phrases into authority. Think back over what we have covered. Finishing a thought, reclaiming authorship, slowing a group, resisting dismissal. None of these work in isolation. They are expressions of a single internal position that your reason deserves continuity. When this position is stable, the specific phrase matters less. Your timing, posture, and tone begin to carry the work. The words simply make visible what is already present. I once watched someone who was rarely interrupted, yet he used almost none of the phrases we've discussed. He spoke slowly. He paused without apology. When interrupted, he stopped, waited, and then continued exactly where he left off. No comment, no correction. The interruption dissolved on its own. This is the end point of integration. The phrases train you toward a presence where they are no longer needed as often. But until then, discipline must be conscious. Inconsistency usually comes from fear of social cost. You worry that asserting yourself in one setting but not another will make you appear selective or difficult. In truth, inconsistency is what creates friction. People adapt quickly to steadiness. They resist unpredictability. The Stoic does not adjust principles based on audience. He adjusts language but not posture. There will be environments where interruption is normalized, fast-paced workplaces, informal gatherings, competitive discussions. These contexts tempt you to abandon discipline in favor of blending in. This is a mistake. Stoicism is most valuable where it is least common. That does not mean you become rigid. It means you remain anchored. Another source of inconsistency is emotional residue. If you had a difficult interaction earlier in the day, you may unconsciously yield later to compensate. Or, after asserting yourself strongly once, you may retreat to avoid repeating discomfort. This emotional accounting is understandable, but it undermines presence. The Stoics trained themselves to meet each moment fresh, unburdened by the last. Each conversation deserves its own clarity. Integration also requires restraint in victory. When someone stops interrupting you, do not become indulgent. Do not rush. Do not fill space unnecessarily. Let the steadiness remain. Authority is maintained as quietly as it is established. There is a deeper integration at work as well. The way you handle interruption mirrors how you handle distraction, frustration, and uncertainty in life. If you abandon your thought at the first resistance, you will abandon tasks, values, and commitments the same way. This is why the Stoics treated small acts as training. A conversation is a rehearsal for adversity. If you can remain composed when spoken over, you can remain composed when delayed, criticized, or overlooked. The phrases are not social tactics. They are exercises in self-command. At this stage, something subtle shifts. You stop measuring success by whether others interrupt you. You measure it by whether you remain aligned with reason. Sometimes you will choose silence because the conversation no longer deserves energy. This is not retreat. It is discernment. Discernment is knowing when to speak and when to withhold without resentment in either choice. When you choose silence deliberately, it carries no weight of regret. When silence is forced, it lingers. Integration removes that residue. You either speak fully or choose not to speak at all. There is no half-presence. People sense this clarity. They may not articulate it, but they respond to it. Conversations with you feel more grounded, less rushed, more deliberate. Over time, others begin to mirror this behavior, not because you corrected them, but because you modeled something steadier. This is Stoic influence at its most effective. It does not instruct, it demonstrates. In the next part, we will look at the internal resistance that still arises even after integration, the quiet voice that questions whether this discipline is worth the effort. This is where Stoic resolve is tested most honestly. Even after discipline is established, resistance does not disappear. It changes form. It becomes quieter, more persuasive. A voice appears not in the moment of interruption, but afterward. It asks whether any of this mattered, whether it was worth the tension, whether remaining silent would have been easier. The Stoics took this voice seriously, not because it is wise, but because it is persistent. This resistance often disguises itself as humility. It says, "You don't need to be heard." On the surface, this aligns with Stoic restraint. But look closer. True humility is indifference to praise and blame. This voice is not indifferent, it is avoidant. It wants peace without effort. Stoicism does not teach erasure of self. It teaches proportion. You do not speak to inflate the ego, but neither do you diminish reason to avoid discomfort. I have felt this resistance many times. After asserting a boundary calmly, I would replay the moment in my mind. I would wonder if I seemed rigid, if others felt judged, if I disrupted harmony. This mental replay is itself a form of self-interruption. It pulls you out of the present and into imagined verdicts. The Stoic response is to return to principle. Did you act with clarity? Did you remain calm? Did you respect others while respecting yourself? If the answer is yes, the outcome is irrelevant. Outcome is not within your control. Conduct is. There is another form of resistance that appears when discipline begins to work. People interrupt you less. Conversations become smoother, and then a dangerous thought arises. Maybe I no longer need to be as deliberate. Maybe I can relax this posture. This is how discipline erodes, not through failure, but through comfort. The Stoic warned against this. They knew that ease is temporary and habit is enduring. When you stop practicing steadiness, you do not remain neutral. You drift. Drift returns you to old patterns quickly. Another quiet resistance appears when you face someone of higher status or perceived authority. The impulse to yield resurfaces. You may tell yourself that hierarchy justifies interruption. Stoicism rejects this reasoning. Rank does not determine the value of reason. You may choose brevity out of respect for time. That is different. But you do not choose disappearance out of deference. The phrase that steadies you in these moments is internal. Act according to principle, not position. This thought restores balance. You speak neither more nor less because of status. You speak as reason requires. There will also be moments when others respond poorly to your steadiness. They may accuse you of being difficult or inflexible. This is where Stoic resolve is refined. You do not defend your character. You let your conduct speak over time. The Stoics trusted time. They believed that consistent virtue becomes visible without explanation. Inconsistency demands justification. Consistency does not. Another temptation is to turn discipline into identity, to become the person who never yields, who always insists. This is not Stoicism. This is rigidity. Discipline must remain flexible, guided by judgment. The goal is not to always speak. It is to always choose. When you choose silence, it is because the moment does not require speech. When you choose speech, it is because clarity demands expression. Both are valid. What matters is authorship of the choice. This is why Stoicism emphasizes inner freedom. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is not being compelled by fear, by habit, by others' impatience. By now you may notice that being talked over has become less important, not because it no longer happens, but because it no longer defines you. You are anchored elsewhere. That anchor is not confidence in others' respect. It is confidence in your own governance. In the final part, we will draw this discipline together and return to the broader Stoic path, how these small acts of speech shape character, and how character, once shaped, carries you forward quietly and steadily. What you have been practicing through all of this is not conversational control. It is self-command. The difference matters. Control looks outward, command looks inward. One tries to manage others, the other governs the self and allows the world to respond as it will. The Stoics believed that character is revealed most clearly in small moments, not in crisis, not in grand decisions, but in ordinary exchanges where the stakes seem low. Being spoken over appears trivial, yet it touches something fundamental, whether you abandon reason under pressure or carry it through calmly to completion. When you finish a thought without apology, you affirm that your mind is not in a hurry to justify its existence. When you reclaim authorship gently, you affirm responsibility. When you slow a group without irritation, you affirm order. When you resist dismissal without resentment, you affirm dignity. These affirmations accumulate quietly. Over time, something changes that is difficult to describe but easy to recognize. You begin to feel less urgency around speech, not because you care less, but because you trust more. You trust your judgment, you trust timing, you trust that silence, when chosen, is not loss. This trust does not make you passive, it makes you deliberate. There will still be interruptions. The world does not become polite simply because you become disciplined. What changes is the effect. Interruption no longer fractures your attention. It no longer triggers self-doubt. It becomes another external event, like noise or weather, noticed, adjusted for, but not internalized. This is the Stoic advantage. You stop measuring yourself by how smoothly the world accommodates you. You measure yourself by how steadily you remain aligned with reason. You may notice that people around you begin to change subtly. Some will interrupt less. Others will listen more carefully. A few may resist your steadiness at first. None of this is your concern. Influence is a byproduct, not a goal. The deeper result is internal. You carry this same steadiness into work, into disagreement, into solitude. You finish tasks you once abandoned midway. You sit with difficult thoughts rather than escaping them. You speak less, but more clearly. This is how small disciplines reshape a life. The Stoics often reminded themselves that they are not here to be admired, but to be consistent. Consistency builds reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust begins with the self. If you find yourself still being talked over at times, do not treat it as failure. Treat it as information. Ask whether you yielded internally before the interruption arrived. Ask whether your mind was already divided. These questions are not accusations, they are tools. Progress in Stoicism is not measured by perfection. It is measured by recovery. How quickly do you return to principle after disruption? How calmly do you resume what you were doing? In conversation, as in life, interruptions are inevitable. Completion is a choice. As you move forward, carry this discipline lightly but firmly. Do not perform it. Do not announce it. Let it show itself through timing, tone, and restraint. Let others draw their own conclusions. And when you speak, speak as someone who expects to finish not because others owe you space, but because you owe yourself clarity. Take time after this to reflect quietly. Notice how you speak today. Notice where you rush, where you retreat, where you hold steady. Choose one moment to practice finishing what you begin, calmly and without apology. If this way of thinking resonates with you, stay close to it. Return to it often. Build your days, your speech, and your character deliberately, quietly, patiently built by Stoicism.